If you're listening on podcast, be sure to tune in to our YouTube channel for more content. The link is in the description.
Welcome to Wild and Weird Radio, a Wild and Weird West Virginia podcast. Welcome back to Wild and Weird Radio, everybody. We are glad to have you joining us again this week for our show. As you can see, we are down a co-host. She got called in out on assignment, so here we are, and we've got a great show lined up for you. We're actually just going to skip the news because there really wasn't much going on this week.
No, really wasn't. And, slow news week. So,
yeah, even for like your typical government release news, anything like that was real slow, which was surprising because.
Or it was repeated, right? I mean,
yeah, or it was just repeats of stuff that we've already covered, and which is surprising because this was a holiday weekend, and that's normally a really popular dump weekend because nobody's paying attention Friday evening after 6. And so nothing cool got dumped Friday evening after 6. So here we are with little to no news. Literally, the only thing that I saw that was actually noteworthy was the Neanderthal footprints that were found in the cave.
Well, that was your ancestors.
Yeah, and it just kind of solidified some of the Bigfoot track castings that have been found, and a lot of the foot mechanics were exhibited there. That was the big takeaway from this week in the news, guys.
So that's the news.
Pretty much. So, Ron, tell us who we've got with us this week.
Well, we have Cheryl Costa coming on with us, one of the premier UFO researchers who's collected tons and tons and tons of actual data. Here is our guest. Cheryl Costa has done more, in my opinion, for actual hard data in UFO research than just about anyone. And boy, has she's got quite a history in this. Why don't you tell everybody about yourself, Cheryl?
Well, I suppose the official stuff in UFOlogy, I started writing a newspaper column for the Syracuse New Times back in 2013, a weekly column. I'd been thrown out of 6 editors' offices when I was out pitching it in late 2012. Okay, and they chased me out, laughed me out, had me escorted to the door by security, that kind of thing after I pitched it. And finally, a guy who had retired from the newspaper I worked for in the technical department, but not in editorial. And I was just finishing up a 40-year-old bachelor's degree in entertainment writing and production. And this is this is working post my retirement from 32 years at Lockheed Martin. Okay. So he invited me over. We talked for 25 or 30 minutes about UFOs. We were about the same age. Turned out he had read about the same stuff I read when I was in high school. Okay. So he said, okay, I'll try you out for a month. So I gave him 5 articles, and I had a very interesting style. I didn't want to sensationalize it. I kept it to, I couldn't tell you who, what, when, where, why. I could tell you what, when, and where. Most of the UFO reports data that was out there, we don't tell you really who it is. And if I could tell you why and could prove it, I'd be getting a Pulitzer and a Nobel Prize. So we went with what, when, and where. So if I wrote a story that said Bob and Susie were on the hood of his 57 Chevy watching the sky when they saw da-da-da-da fly over, the report of the UFO was always accurate. I made up Bob and Susie in the car. Okay. And the boss was good with that. Entertainment writing, not a dyed-in-the-wool journalist. Okay. And so they tried me out for about a month. and I got a phone call, and he had this tone like the Dread Pirate Roberts, I'll most likely kill you in the morning. And he says, come on over, we have to talk. And I thought, well, that's it. I had my 5 articles. At least he tried me out, you know. So I go over to the meeting. The parking lot's torn up. They're repaving it. I'm in the meeting 10 minutes later. I come walking in the door. All the columnists are sitting around this conference table. And he stops talking, and he looks over at me, and he points at me. And he says, there's our rock star.
Wow.
I said, what are you talking about? He says, you've been here 5 weeks. You're pulling more page views. This is the online edition. You're pulling more page views than all the columnists combined. So he says, keep doing what you're doing. And 6 months later, the digital editor, who I was always a freelance. They never hired me formally. I was always a freelance. I got paid, but I was a freelance. So the digital editor calls me up about 5 months later and says, you're pulling a national audience because they can measure this at the server. Christmas party, him and the publisher get up there and say, Cheryl is pulling an international audience from this dinky little weekly paper in upstate New York, you know. So obviously UFOs were of interesting reading. Now, paper's demise in June of 2019, Linda and I published our first book of UFO statistics in March of 2017. Okay. New York Times wrote an article. In fact, if your listeners want to see the article, if they Google NYT for New York Times, NYT Costa, COSTA, space UFO, they will get an April 14th article in Science Magazine, of all things, because New York Times was trying to. This is part of the 2017 New York Times effort to give disclosure. People kept thinking it'd be the president or something. It was the Obama era release of information by the CIA, mostly Kissinger documents from the Nixon administration, but there was all these PDFs from the CIA and everything. And the CIA for years have been saying, oh, we don't research UFOs. Oh, no, that's crazy stuff, right? We get in there and find out that the OSI's been pulling their hair out since the 1940s, right? You know, and so the New York Times, when they saw our data from our first book, they saw that we actually filled in the holes of data points that they were pulling their hair out. We actually had the answers. Okay. And then we came along in April with our story. And then December 16th, later that year, was the whole thing with ATIP. Okay, so a lot of people seem to think ATIP was, but it was 2017 was a big year, and the New York Times, a newspaper of record, broke the story a little bit at a time. They saw the same stuff we saw with the CIA stuff, and when our book came along, said, "My God, they're on top of it too. Let's talk to these old ladies in Syracuse," you know, and. And Ralph Blumenthal came up on the train. I picked him up at the train station. We put him up over at this Aloft place and sat in my our old house, 100-year-old house. We had a front room that was really too small to make into a living room, and 3 owners before us knew this as well. So it had a fireplace, 2 front doors, a window on each side, a staircase, and an archway going in the dining room. There's no good wall to put furniture against, you know. So I went in there about a month before we moved in, and I built floor-to-ceiling bookcases because my wife is a retired librarian, and we have books up the wazoo. And it ended up being a library, floor-to-ceiling. You could have had a gorilla hanging on these things because I anchored them deep in the walls. And we had over 1,500 reference books, 40 books of fiction. That's it. It's like Harry Potter and a handful of mysteries, but that was it. But the bottom line, that was our first book. When that came out,
I think I'm actually looking at pictures of your bookshelf right now.
Yeah, if you see the New York Times article, yeah, that's our bookshelf.
Yeah.
And it's crazy stuff. The bottom line with that first book was the day that article came out online, and again the next day when it came out in print, my phone started ringing at 8:30 in the morning, and it was the Times of London. Okay, I didn't get off the phone. I was on the phone all day up to about 8:30 at night. Okay, and at that point, 8:30 at night, it was way into the dark hours over in Europe. But I was talking to European editors and news directors. over at the New Times, their phones were ringing off the hook. Similar people. So this is a big deal. Much later, many months later, they did a huge 3,500 word feature story with pictures and everything of just about me and our column. The editor did a special editorial that week and said, the most popular column in our paper is not in print. It's on our online edition, you know. And it was crazy stuff, you know. Rested for 5 years, did a whole bunch of podcasts and everything. And then in 2021, we released the new book, the second edition of United UFO Sightings Desk Reference 2001 to 2020. Okay, we wanted to do as scientists, we wanted to do long day, believe me. 20-year study of the first 20 years of the 21st century was our objective. Okay, that was the scientific measurement we wanted to do. And the resolution we have and the detail we have now and the cleanup we did on the database and everything during the lockdown, I had nothing better to do. I'll give you an example. During the middle of the lockdown, we were starting to look ahead to the 2020 book. Okay. And we were sitting there one day, no place else to go but, you know, drink and eat and watch streaming TV. And we were sitting there talking, and we had a little statistics we pulled out of the database. And I looked at Linda, and he says, "We're going to have some problems here." She says, "What?" I said, "Well, we wanted to go down to city resolution, and the problem is 3.5% of the cities in this database of 167,632 records spanning 20 years. The 3.5% of that is didn't enter the city." So there was a blank or a statement was put in that field. The sheriff told me not to tell you. My mother told me not to tell you, that kind of stuff.
Right.
So then we discovered 7.5%. Now, okay, 167,632 times 0.07, 7% didn't spell their city correctly. Okay, or if they spelled it, it would be, I'll give you an example. Eureka Springs, Arkansas, right next to Joe's Pub. You can't sort on a thing like that, you know. And that worked out to 11,700 records that had to be fixed. Okay, and so it, and we also knew that the automation that we had written to put county data, neither Newfork or MUFON. Newfork didn't collect county data at all. MUFON did, but it was dependent upon the person who was making an entry to put it in. And 9 times out of 10, they didn't. Okay, so we had to manually put it in, which was kind of groundbreaking because nobody had county information in the UFO data. So, and then our automation was not that smart. I was an IT manager. I wrote good code, but it wasn't good because it kept hitting Eureka Springs next to Joe's Pub, next to the vegetable stand, next to McDonald's, you know, that kind of stuff. So we decided to merge in a golden email list. And what we did was pull the base down into Excel, and we merged in a different color. And we lined up all the fields and everything, and we merged in a golden email list and sorted it by state and city, and then we would start adding additional fields with zip code, longitude, corrected the counties, corrected the spelling on the cities, that type of thing. And it took. This is the goofy part about it. People call me passionate for doing this. It was like going back to work at Lockheed. Remember, I'm retired from Lockheed. So it was like I was back in a 7-hour-a-day, 5 days a week schedule from middle of August 2020 to the first week of January 2021. 850 hours.
Just fixing clerical data.
Wow.
Just fixing all the clerical and trying to refine it. And then, I got it within 0.02% correction just in the last couple of weeks with some of the things we're getting ready to produce, which I'll tell you about in a minute. We found little subtle things. I found a whole total of 40 counties that were either
Hey Ron,
what just happened?
It's
I don't
weird
know.
audio on your end again.
No, there it goes. It's back up.
Okay, that wasn't me, was it?
No, it happens every now and again. We don't know what that is.
Oh, wait
every
a
now
minute,
and then
guy.
we get some
Okay.
weird RF over from Ron's side.
All right, I'm going to tell you something. You talk about UFOs most of the time, right?
Oh,
We talk about it a fair amount. Yeah, we cover a
Okay.
broad spectrum, but
Okay.
UFOs always get a bug.
Okay, nobody believes us when they say Men in Black. I can be on a landline call to a real terrestrial radio station talking to their mid-morning talk radio show.
Yeah.
My line will go dead if I say the wrong thing. And I say the wrong thing, and the line goes dead. The radio station finally gets back in touch with me 15 or 20 minutes later and says, it was like your phone didn't exist. We called it, and it said, this phone does not exist. You know, that kind of stuff.
See, prior to starting Wild and Weird Radio, and when Wild and Weird was in its infancy, and even beyond that, Ron and I would have these conversations on the phone. And I'm a former Air Force sheet metal specialist, so I mean, we talked about stuff, and we kept it as kosher and clean as we could, but because you're on a phone line.
There were instances though.
There were several instances where like we could actually hear other people, and I knew it was radio chatter because I worked on projects.
Yep.
That I knew that audio from, and I knew that audio was coming from us when we were sitting in a dark room. So
I get it. Believe me, I do. There's been some other incidences like that, and it was like somebody put a piece of telephone test equipment on the line and completely drowned us out. You know, it's crazy. Yes. Well, the bottom line with everything here is I'm former Air Force, served in Vietnam. I was telephone lineman, pressurizer tech, that type of thing. I climbed telephone poles in Vietnam. People shoot at you on those things.
Yes.
Yeah, you're an easy target at that point.
You think?
Wow.
Okay. And then later, a couple of years later, I was in the Navy. Okay. And they put me through 2 years worth of school. And when I left the Navy in the early 80s and the reserves, I was a first-class petty officer, and I was a senior electronic warfare tech. Okay. Now, what does that mean? I spent a lot of time listening and analyzing signals.
Yeah.
Okay. That was mostly what I did.
The bulk of your job.
Collateral duty, radar operator, navigation watch. It was a nuclear submarine navigation watch. Then they figured out I had a dark room in my housing, so they sent me to periscope photography school, and so I spent many surface hours taking pictures of other people's ships through the periscope, and then blowing them up from the dark room, and then sitting there with my tweezers. Once I got something that was a good scale, I'd scale it, and I could sit there and measure the antennas on the ship's mast and tell you exactly what kind of equipment it was, you know.
Wow.
Okay, so when Linda and I did all this UFO stuff, there used to be a program on KGRA called the Commander Cobra. And all his military friends, he's a Navy commander, and all his military friends were on there one night, and they were interviewing me about the book, the new book. And they were interviewing, and they sat there and they said, this sounds like old school intelligence with modern tools. You know, you're doing your old job here, you know.
Right.
And in a way we have. And so let me give you some cool numbers.
Oh, yeah.
Okay? You're going to love these
numbers.
Let's hear them. And I got numbers from West Virginia as well, but let me give you the national numbers, okay? Okay, there are 3,232 counties. Now, if you Google that, you get numbers all over the place, but basically, because some city-state areas have become counties into themselves, things like this, and this stuff is constantly changing.
Yeah,
they're merging counties.
Annexing each other. And,
exactly.
It happens all the time.
Okay, of 3,232 counties, 3,129 reported UFOs between 2001 to 2020. That means there was only 103 that did not report UFOs.
99.89% say.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Okay, and so your the actual number is 97%.
Wow,
pretty good, Joe.
And yeah, that was a good call. Then, okay, now municipalities, there's 35,878 79 municipalities in the United States. Okay, corporations, all that stuff. 20,348 of them reported UFOs. Okay, now that's when you start plotting dots on the map and it's down to the city level and everything, and it makes it look like it's all around the big cities. Okay, and everybody in the UFO community go out here in any of the Facebook groups, they'll sit there and knee-jerk, oh, Cheryl, it's all around the big cities. It's about population, Cheryl. Pat me on the head, you stupid wench, And I've been called that. So, all right. So what it works out to is there are 41,692 zip codes in the United States. We had UFO reports logged in 623 zip codes. That's in the United States. 1 in 250 people reports what they see. This is based on two national polls. One Fox Pictures did in 2017. I didn't trust the metric. And then one that was done by Gallup that confirmed it 2 years later in 2019. It was 16.74% of adult Americans say they've seen a UFO. Well, that didn't jive with 167,632. So we started working the math. And when I got that second metric in 2019, I said, I can work with this. So we played with it. And basically what that shakes down to is that with adult Americans, based on a certain year census poll, or like 258.3 million adults over 18 years old. And that basically gave us 43,239,432 adult Americans. Okay. That's 20%. There's 16 or 17% of Americans say they've seen a UFO. Now take this from the mystical side. I'm from the consciousness side too, right?
Yeah.
Every time someone sees a UFO, their view of reality becomes a little bit more elastic. It's a spiritual experience for a lot of people. Okay, it's awesome type of thing. It's very, very spiritual. Okay, and remember I said 249 of them didn't report it. So this number is a much bigger number if you take that. Let me give it to you. 167,632 times 249. Okay. And the number is okay. Well, okay, it's up in that big number, that 42 million number. Okay.
2 million.
Yeah.
Okay, it's huge. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's based on the math, and I say the math is a little on the fuzzy side because it's based on polling data and that type of thing. Okay, let's talk West Virginia. You'll love this. Okay.
Well, before we get into West Virginia, one of the things that that we had learned from Stanton Friedman was that, and this is in a room full of people who are like all on board for UFOs, right? And they're into UFO data, they're into the research, right? He asked the room how many people in the room had seen a UFO. A bunch of people raised their hand. Follow-up question immediately after is, how many of you reported it?
Hands went down.
Right. There's like 2 in the room.
Yeah.
Out of that data. So imagine how much more the quantification.
1 in
10.
Yeah.
Okay. The problem is that number was always based on that kind of a polling. Okay.
Right.
And it didn't jive with the sighting numbers. And then people came back to me and say, well, Cheryl, it's 1 in 10 of the people who saw them, and then 1 of the 10 people that reported them. And they kept trying to convolute it like that. And the numbers just didn't work, no matter how we cranked them. So when I waited around till like a poll came out and said this, and then we said, that is something we can work to. And I talked to another statistician. We bounced some ideas around one night on the phone, and I cranked it this way. And the number's huge. We're talking huge amounts of numbers. So here's the deal. West Virginia, this is fun. West Virginia between 2001 and 2020 had 1,125 reported UFO sightings. Okay. They had them reported from all 55 counties. Okay. Now this is where it gets a little shaky. They have a total of 703 zip codes but sometimes a zip code, like in a state house, it might be different zip codes on different floors at the state house or something like that. They might, the state government might have 100 zip codes just to themselves. Okay, so, but in the context of physical places, it's more like about 653 zip codes that are operational. Okay, 287 of them reported UFOs. Okay, then West Virginia has 77 cities, 148 towns, 6 villages, and 1 incorporated community. Okay, that gives us 232. But you also have a lot of little places. It's a kind of that dry. What was the name of that place? As you drive by,
yeah, 100%.
Okay,
yeah,
we've been there.
Trust us,
Yes.
we know.
Okay, so there's about 169 of them, making more like 400 places in towns, villages, counties, not counties, but villages, and just places. Okay, so we had a total of, like I said, 287 zip codes had sightings, and we have in our log 216 of 401 places, okay, that reported UFOs. Now, people ask me, why did you bother to do zip codes? Can't you just plot a map with a lot of little dots? Or the ones, the college professor, put a little UFO over the thing. I said it would completely fill up the page, my friend, you know. So the dots.
It's just like some of these Bigfoot maps you see.
Yeah.
Where it's like just covered with
green
Bigfoot silhouettes.
See, that's the problem. That's sloppy. It really is. And if you do it with the dots, again, everybody points at the big city concentration, the state capital or something, and says, oh, it's all right there. No, it's not. Because we discovered between 2017, when we published our first book, and 2021, we discovered hours of the day, and it was like 68% to 75% happened between 5 o'clock in the afternoon and about 11:30 at night, with the bulk of that between 8:30 and 10:30 at night. That's bedroom community. That is the suburbs. That is the bedroom communities, the unincorporated communities beyond that, and getting out in the rural. And only about a week ago, I was able to confirm that by looking at a particular county. There's the county seat. You see sightings all the way across 2001 to 2020. All right. And then you looked at all the rest of these zip codes, and there was like onesie twosies over 20 years, onesie twosies, 5Zs. That's about it. Very small numbers for every one of those zip codes. But if you add up all those non-major metropolitan area zip codes, they either came close to, equaled, or surpassed what that major city had. It's all out in the bedroom communities. Dog walkers, smokers, people coming home from a Bible study, coming back from the movies, coming back from shopping, coming off shift. It's all that late night stuff that is where people see it all. Crazy,
absolutely. Huh? Yeah, I mean, it makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah.
So I'll shut up a minute. Ask me your questions. That's probably easier.
That was fascinating. That was absolutely fascinating, because we hear tons of that, right? I mean, so many.
We do.
Yeah. Go ahead, Joe.
We've been working on a project here with using Google Earth, right?
Okay.
And we've made a Bigfoot map for reports that were called into us, and we've also got a UFO map that we're currently working on getting it finalized for reports. This is just reports that have been called into us over the last 3 years, 4 years.
3 years.
And so just during this 3-year time frame, we have hold on.
What in the world was that?
Did I hear like a scream? Or
yeah, I did. I heard that. I don't know if it was his kid or a dog or what that was. That was weird.
Somebody's parrot. Had that kind of a quality to it.
I used to have one of those. I can attest to that. Yes. It was the worst thing ever. Yeah, I don't know what happened. That was weird. And then he just completely dropped, which has never happened before. It's the UFO talk, Cheryl.
Yeah.
That is amazing, though. I mean, until he gets back. The fact that you actually set out to do this, that's and catch the actual raw data, that's something that people just They don't do. I mean, they
No.
want the story.
That's the problem has been.
Mhm.
In fact, we had a lot of people push back on us because they would say, "Oh, where's your stories?" Or they get the
Yeah.
book and they say, "Oh, it's charts, graphs, and tables."
Yeah.
Boring.
Boring.
Where's your case studies?
Yeah.
Let's put this the thing. Linda's the scientist of the two of us. She's got the bona
Yeah.
fide science degrees. I've got the arts and entertainment degree, the top hat and the cane. Okay. So that's why I go and talk to 10,000 people at a conference. Okay. But she basically said when we decided to do this, I was still writing my column and we had done New York State. New York State was my beat.
Yeah.
And we had done New York State and we had a bunch of retired state directors from MUFON, retired MUFON state investigators. And we started showing them our data for just New York State. And they were saying, we didn't know there was a cluster there. We didn't know there was a cluster there either. Oh, it's supposed to be all around Lake Erie. Hey, wait a minute. Why is Lake Ontario got all this, almost as much as Lake Erie? And then they'd say, well, Hudson Valley, that's the hot spot. No, Suffolk County, Long Island is. Montauk Point. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is what we produced.
Yeah.
So we calculated the numbers up the Hudson, in the Finger Lakes, down the St. Lawrence Seaway, down across Lake Ontario, down into Lake Erie, and it ended up being like 68% of the sightings in the state, and so this was amazing work to present, but everybody's saying, oh, where's your case studies, So Linda and I had to basically take a position. In fact, we had to argue this issue the other day down in the Ozarks. Okay. Linda got up there for 15 minutes. It was unprecedented for Linda to get up there for 10 minutes and from this, 500 people and say, all right, we did a cluster epidemiology study, kind of like she used to be a head librarian at the Environmental Protection Agency. Okay. She knew how to do all this stuff, So that's what we set out to do. Instead of looking at case studies, instead of looking at one ant to death.
Yes.
We wanted to study the anthill.
Yes, the whole thing.
Yeah, that was our objective, and we did exactly that.
Makes sense.
And it's been fun. People ask me how many hours.
Oh.
If you count the first book took us a tad over 1,800 hours to produce. We didn't know what we were doing. Things we did then, it took us like 2 months to do. Stabilizing the database. Can you still hear me okay?
Yeah, I got you. You just bumped your
yeah, I bumped the mic. Yeah.
I do it all the time.
The things that took us 2 months to do, I can do in a week now.
Yeah.
Okay. Stuff that took us a month to do then, I can do in a morning now. Okay.
Hmm.
But see, we were both former federal contractors. And the first rule of government contracting is do as little work as possible. So and that sounds like we're trying to be lazy. No,
yeah.
You write a good process procedure. So the next time you have to do it, it takes you half the time and there's more profit, So, so we did that. Now, when we've got all the way through the current book, we've got to date. And again, we're still old habits die hard. Contractors, you log your time. Okay. 6,000 hours between both books. And the time in between.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we've got. Now, here's what our next project is. And then we're going to walk away.
Mm-hmm.
We've got it. People wanted us to go down to the city level for resolution. And if we did, it would have been 1.5 feet thick. We calculated it.
Oh, yeah.
We ran it through and figured out what it was. We knew how many pages a day. It would have been 1.5 feet thick. Nobody's going to print that. Okay.
Right.
And we had certain limits within Amazon's publishing since we were self-publishing. So we decided to do 50 individual state books, right, with resolution right down. In fact, the biggest chart in the thing will be county for each state, county, zip code, city, display shapes. What the shapes were going across a chart going across the page for 20 years. Okay. California is going to be upwards of 220 just for that chart alone. Horizontal format. I just did Ohio here with 5,700. I had to give a copy to a college professor yesterday, and it was 144 pages. Okay, now when you get into a book, and that's
Yeah.
just this one chart. Okay,
Yes.
but we're going
Yeah.
to produce it. We're going to try and do it for all 50 states. We've got a very rapid production process. Linda signed. In fact, we had a documentary film team here in the living room over the weekend on Friday, and they were sitting here watching us. We had 6-foot church tables stretched out, and we had the manuscript for the book, the dummy manuscript laid out for the first book for Ohio. And they watched. They had mics on us, and we sat there and argued the points of what chapter should go where and this kind of thing. But we have a lot of it is very stock stuff I can generate out of a computer, and then there's stuff we can write that won't change between books. Okay, and then there's like the preface and the forewords would change between books because it's unique to that state, and that's easy stuff to do. It's like 2 pages for her, 5 pages for me, no big deal. Okay, so that's the plan. Then what we're going to do is there's 29 recognizable shapes between both databases. There's 33 shapes. Okay. 29 of them are recognizable. There's a couple of them that are like anomalous, NA, unknown, that kind of thing. We're not going to bother with that. Oh, the shape, light in the sky. I'm not going to bother doing light in the sky for God's sake.
Nocturnal light or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, we're not going to do light, but we'll do all the the eggs, the Saturn shapes, the rectangles, the spheres, everything. Yeah. Okay, and so we're going to do 29 shape books.
Oh wow.
Okay, so what will happen is it will be about almost 80 books altogether. We'll probably put a couple of analysis books in there too that will reference these books. We'll have about 80 books with the reference book and everything. And the idea is that it will be the largest compilation of compiled, analyzed UFO data in human history. And we're going to walk away.
Cheryl, that is amazing. I mean, the fact that you're taking on a project that big, just for the shapes alone, you have data there that's going to not only show shapes, if you look back at all those years, you're going to be able to see an actual pattern, I believe, right?
Oh, each of the shapes books.
Yes.
We've already done a dummy, but we did a dummy book, circle UFOs. It's the largest volume of them. Okay. Yeah. We did a dummy. Okay. And we're able to print out maps of every shape across the United States, and you see their patterns. Not every state has every shape.
Mm-hmm.
It's something we discovered. Okay, and we're plotting it by zip code. Okay, and of course people have written me, can you plot the single sighting across the United States? You can't. You can't, because one guy saw a triangle, somebody else at the same time, on the handoff.
It was a sphere.
It was a sphere. Everybody ask a cop. 20 people see the crime, 20 different stories. So we can't track it or anything like that. But we are going to plot all these shapes by their patterns in an individual state and what it looks like across the United States, and that same thing, state, county, zip code, city, display, and the number for that particular type of shape that the book is named after.
Wow, this amount of data is insane. I mean, it literally is an incredible amount of work. I could see that
it's quantifiable.
We've got a grant. It's theoretically we have well, no. Theoretically we have a grant. We're both retired now. We're getting a grant from the government.
It's awesome though.
That's great.
The data points, could you imagine if it's ever put into like an AI system? I mean, you'd be able to cross-reference data pretty much instantaneously.
It ends up being, well, at least on the New Fork side, which is 60% of the data. Mm-hmm. Okay, it's 59 point something. It's 60-40 roughly between New Fork and MUFON. It ends up being an index to sightings. Okay, guys like Earl Grey, we're going to have Earl Grey write the forward to this thing in a generic context because he says this is terrific. Instead of having to crawl around and move folks, MUFON's CMS because you're getting ready to go out to some county, you open up this book, and Cheryl and Linda have put in everything from both New Fork and MUFON in there, so you have some idea of how many UFOs have been there, let alone maybe a certain shape. So this has been very helpful to a lot of investigators. And we're finding some goofy patterns that people didn't know about, and because rainy day, got nothing better to do, and I don't watch daytime TV, so play with the numbers, So it's been fun to do that, and so that's Linda shudders at this idea that I want to do all these books. She says, you're crazy. I said, what else am I going to do? Sit in a rocking chair and die? You know, I want to get this done. Besides that, there's another piece to this. We moved to Cleveland, Ohio on the 16th of December.
What?
Yeah,
Really?
we did, from upstate New York. Linda came to me about back in the spring last year and said, I'm going to retire in November, December timeframe. I said, good. She says, I want to go home. I said, you are home. She says, no, I want to go home to Cleveland. I said, oh my, you know, and so we said, okay. So I had to slow down on what we were working on and put on my old retired person's project manager hat again and be a project manager for the next 4 months. And basically, I didn't do big boxes. I did banker's boxes. So when the movers came into the apartment, we had boxes 2 deep along the wall piled to the ceiling. The place looked like a container ship. Okay. and they went back to the warehouse, and their supervisor went back to the warehouse. Instead of using hand trucks to take the boxes out, they came back with this like dolly cart with like a box on it. Like it was like a big trailer, you know, the guy could wheel out of there with 12 to 20 banker's boxes at a time, you know. But so we were sitting here, we were on the ground 16 December. They closed the place 15 December. We drove the next day. We're out here, took the keys to the apartment, had a blow up mattress, and they came on the 17th. And we were sitting here for Christmas, eating Christmas dinner on top of a box. It was nuts, but we're squared away now. You see a big open room here.
Yeah, it looks great.
Well, what we did was we did not make a traditional living room. We're sitting in our office. This is what would normally be the living room. We have a chaise lounge and 2 pub chairs over here, and you probably can't see it, but there's a big long table back there, and we have 2 more 6-foot church tables. We can strap them together with bungee cords, and we can set up a war room very quickly here.
Wow.
And
Nice.
project table. Well, it comes in handy. We both sew. We both like to cut out patterns. So you put 2 tables together so you can cut out a big pattern or something. The other thing is, if we want to work on a book, we laid out the manuscript for the one we tested. Our prototype for Ohio, we laid out literally here with a documentary film crew watching us argue over the layout of the book, you know, that type of thing. It was a real argument, you know, a real professional discussion, let's say it that way, about this prototype book that's going to be the template for all the individual state books. And that's what we're up to. And then our plan is to get them out and walk away to other things we like to do.
Wow.
Okay?
I mean, I can't think of.
I'm 70 next week. Oh
my
I
goodness.
would like not to. I don't want. My deepest respects to Stanton Friedman. I love the man. In fact, I went to him just before we printed the white book, the original white book in 17. We were at the one in Arizona, International UFO Congress, right? In February that year. We were just getting ready to come out with the book. And I brought like printout for one state. And I hand him this printout for the state, and he looks at it, tables and charts and graphs, and he stands up in the vendor's room and says, somebody's finally printing data, you know.
You sounded exactly like him.
He was
Awesome.
Just keep doing it. That's brilliant. Blue Book didn't do that. I said, we know they didn't do that. So,
So true.
Senator Rubio got a copy of the Pink Book last spring. What we did, it was actually closer to summer. What happened was, I saw where this whole thing was going. You know, they were getting ready to come out with that what they call it, that Unified Services Report, whatever. I put 2 Pink Books on the couch, and I'm sitting there looking at them, and I said, okay, they got to have something better than just that. So Rubio, Senate Select Intel Committee, he was the head of it at that time before the election, and there was a New York guy that was senior person in the House Intel Committee. So I printed out Florida, which is the number 2 state for sightings, by zip code all the way down. It was 1.5 inches thick. And they did the same thing for New York, and it was almost as big. And we packed in 2 5-pound packages with a very terse, very short cover letter with like a 5-line executive summary on the top, and just say, if you decide to hold congressional hearings, we are the civilian experts on the statistical numbers, period. And we shipped them to them. And we thought, okay, fine. About 4 weeks later, I'm coming down the hall of my apartment building and glance out in the parking lot, and there are 6 cars from 3 different police constabularies parked behind my car. I'm going, oh, who did I piss off? You know. What it ended up being is we had a whole bunch of old ladies in our building, and they looked out and they saw a drug deal in our cul-de-sac from our apartment complex, and they called in, and she says, I think it's ugly. You better, the lady told me later who called it in, she says, I think you better send more than 1 car. So they, like, you know,
they sent a whole...
Somebody from the Forest Service came down there and just had these guys, all the cop cars in the world descended on this drug deal. And, you know, it was so funny to look. But my initial reaction was, oh my God, those packages I sent to Washington, you know. So never got a response. Nothing I've ever sent down there to my congressman or my senator has ever had a response.
Wow.
You send them good data and they don't pay attention. You send good data. I sent a thing like the same kind of thing to the New York Times. I sent one to the New York Daily News. Crickets. What's interesting, the White Book originally went to Senator Gillibrand and Schumer. They were my state senators in New York State. And never heard from either of them, though the guys in Schumer's office said it never got to Washington. So I hand walked in their copy over, and they put it in their mailbag and sent it down there. It's just a senatorial mailbag. It still never got in 5 years. I haven't ever gotten a thank you from them. And then I stopped anytime I ever wrote them about anything else, veterans benefits, anything, Social Security, anything else.
Yeah.
I used to get an answer back in 5 or 6 weeks. Okay. Veterans Affairs, something like that. And I don't get them. I have since found out that my email is blocked on the federal system.
Oh, well, yeah, that'll do it.
Well, there you go then.
Okay. So you understand how all this goes. People say I know it's not my imagination. You know, once is coincidence, second time is bad luck, third time is enemy action. You know,
Cheryl, they tell us all we're crazy. It's okay.
Well, here's the thing. You can look at it this way. Right? They know your email.
Yeah.
they know your email, which means you might just get one eventually.
Eventually.
Yeah.
Do you think that they actually want the data? I mean, or do you think it's just like, that I think that would be the question.
What they're doing right now, or do you think they're actually looking for data?
I don't know. I don't know if they are. The way, except for what classified information they had related to like the last 20 years with the naval things. Lou Alessandro, I remember I was a journalist. I interviewed him 3 times. And it was always, people say, oh, did you plot your data against all the bases in the United States? And they said, after 9/11, I certainly did not do that. I wasn't looking up the street address of every base in the country.
Right, yeah, because that's going to get you on a blacklist.
That would get me flagged.
In a hurry.
Okay. Yeah. There was that. And then the other aspect to it was most bases after the end of the Cold War downgraded to reserve bases, Air National Guard bases, things like that. The only people who had the advanced technology that ET is interested in, nuclear weapons, aka Lou Alessandro, always the fleets and a tiny handful of Air Force bases. I mean, SAC doesn't even really exist anymore. Everything was taken away from SAC back in the late 70s by the ballistic missile submarines, hiding them out deep in the ocean. So that's the deal. It's not like what it was during the Cold War, base in every place. So no, I don't plot them against them. Now people say to me, well, did you plot it against the nuclear reactors in the state? There's 55 commercial civilian reactors. I have their street address. I know their county. I have run a report like that. And the thing is telling, they got almost nothing.
Wow.
So
Look at that.
So that was what was telling to me, the fact that it was almost nothing. Yeah. So
now,
go ahead,
before
sir.
I had to abruptly exit, that was a mess, literally. Did Ron, did you finish talking about the Google Maps project at all?
No. We completely
Glossed
went
it.
UFO crazy and got off track. So
That makes sense. I
it
assumed as
happens.
much.
Yes.
So yeah, you're involved. So I figured that was where it went.
was-
So
We had
all
a
right,
good time.
so with the mapping project, we'll go ahead and we'll start talking about that, and we can insert that here. Just see what your thoughts are. So we've been working on the Bigfoot mapping project with our own just in West Virginia using a Google Earth project, and we've been working on a UFO data project with Google Maps or Google Earth, and plotting out all of the UFO sightings. Now we've got like the dots that we're able to use, and when you zoom in through the map, they spread out. That way better than just a static map looking at covered blotches. One of the things that we noticed was something that we had kind of assumed, which was that a lot of this traffic that was being seen in the air of these UAPs, UFOs, was in and around these high interest areas that were along the riverway here in West Virginia. And at one point in time, and some still actively today, were producing components needed for nuclear weapons.
Okay, I can talk to that. I hope you'll have this guy on sometime. His name is Tom Conwell. He's in Troy, New York. I can get you his address if you like, and contact information. He was from the paranormal side. He took our first book and he started sticking pins and a map on the wall, destroyed the wall. Plasterboard, and every pin he put into it was destroying it. But he found out a couple of things, which we added 2 of those lines in our book. The bottom line was we knew our drivers. We had 5 drivers. It was like population, temperate weather, hours a day, leisure time, and access to broadband. These were drivers to reporting to citing reports. Okay. And remember, we always sent out, we weren't out to prove that they were real or where they were from. We set out to measure the scale of the phenomena. That was our objective. It was very easy. We had it up on the wall and it's a poster, the scale of the phenomena. Okay. And everybody else wanted us to prove something. And that's what the field investigators are trying to do. They're playing CSI, guys. Linda and I are old ladies. We don't do ticks. We don't do barbed wire. We don't do cow patties. And we don't do Mrs. Murphy's barnyard. And we started our research, like Indiana Jones said, in the library. I'm married to a librarian. We sat down and did the research that way. And like I said, it was big scale. We wanted to study the anthill, not the individual ant to death. Okay. Tom gave us influencers. Now we had several influencers we had observed, but he had 2 that were very, very interesting. One, they seemed to be haunting our pollution sites, dead coal mines, dead oil fields, dead fracking fields, dead strip mines, heavily polluted lakes, heavily polluted rivers, and anything to do with radioactive stuff. Okay.
Wow.
So that was stuff that he identified. Then his other influencer, the other influencers like water, that kind of thing. But everybody knows around water is big.
Right.
You look at the sightings around the Great Lakes, it's in the many thousands of sightings. Move 2 states away, it's in the low hundreds. But we also track that back to lack of rural broadband, poor counties and rural areas, and lack of broadband. Okay, those 103 counties I told you about that didn't have any sightings, very poor, no broadband, and typically rural. Okay.
Makes sense.
So we need rural broadband yesterday. We really do. Not only for what we want, UFOs reports, but we need rural broadband for all kinds of what we call everything from land engineering, minerals, natural resource searching, things like that, farming, things like that. It's needed for a whole host of industries, So there's that. The other major thing he said they were following is they're extremely interested in our fault lines. He tracked them along the fault lines around the caldera out there, Yellowstone. He tracks them down all over Washington State. He tracks them down the Madeira one, going down through the Midwest. The Madeira Fault, that thing. And so they're very interested in that kind of stuff. So we learned a lot.
Yeah.
We learned a lot. We had people email us, did you compute it against aircraft Victor lines, the flight routes? No, we don't. You want to do that? We won't give you the database, but we'll give you data that will help you do that.
Sure.
But don't ask us to do it. People, did you do it? What was the cloud cover those days? We don't know. What was the ground temperature those days? We don't know.
Right.
Okay. We did the stuff we could easily mine out of the data, okay, that was related to the sighting, and everybody will come up. Linda has a great line. It's this senior scientist in our group, coming from her library skills, and coming from having been the head librarian at the Environmental Protection Agency. Just because you want a statistic doesn't mean that it exists.
Yes.
Right.
That's brilliant, actually.
Now, can I tell you something about Bigfoot?
Oh,
Sure.
please.
Let's hear it.
Did you know Bigfoot has language?
According to the Sierra Sounds and the U.S. Navy linguist that worked the Sierra
Nelson.
Sounds.
Yeah. I got the shoot the breeze with this guy, and then he had 90 minutes worth of stuff up there in audio, and he played back, and he'd say, here's one part was a male and a female, and they sound like an old married couple, and it did.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it does. Yeah.
It was great stuff. So I wanted to make sure you knew about this guy, because he was fantastic.
Oh yeah. It's fantastic work. We're friends with Ron Moorhead, who was one of the collectors of those recordings.
Okay. Yep. Okay. Good.
And so we've had him on the show before, and we've hung out with him at different conferences and whatnot. But yeah, Ron's a friend of the show, and just the work that he put in. Have you, Ron? Just because we're mentioning Ron, he wrote a book that's really interesting. You might specifically find intriguing, and it's called Quantum Bigfoot. And it's exploring the quantum mechanics behind the possibilities of some of these paranormal, more unusual aspects of Bigfoot sightings.
And other things. Really.
The mystic in me will agree with you 100% there. A guy down in Pennsylvania many years ago had Bigfoot sightings on his farm. His adult son and him were out there with their shotguns, looking around, and son was off looking at some other noise, and the farmer happened upon a very large Bigfoot, and the guy was holding the shotgun on him, and Bigfoot turned around, looked at him, went click, and not there.
Yeah.
Okay.
See, these are the stories. Yes.
And then they get this other stuff with the guy I heard over the weekend. They went up and they thought they opened a portal or something, but they were very familiar with this stuff. And he said they keep going up there with fully charged spare batteries for their cameras and things, and they get up there on the site and the batteries drain. Well, if you watch the Ghost guys on Sci-Fi Channel, their batteries get sapped out too. There's something very paranormal going on there of a quantum nature to do that. And as the resident mystic in the room, 7 years in a Buddhist monastery, I would agree with it. Yeah, and a card carrying a witch.
I'm impressed with the Buddhist monastery. I knew the rest, but really, the Buddhist monastery. So you've learned some stuff.
Yeah.
I've
been a Wiccan since '76 in the Navy. Okay. And then it got out. I got out into '94. I was invited to a consciousness raising thing. This was not commercial. This was like a private letter. I wasn't even going to go because It wasn't a brochure, and I had been seen on TV in 91 through 93 as a witch, that type of thing, national television, Larry King, you name it. And I get a private letter from New Mexico and thinking, oh, this is a grand necktie party. I'm not going to go to that. I don't know these people, And I had a Native American friend in D.C. He's passed away now, but he was a lawyer, constitutional lawyer, and he represented the tribes, the Cherokee guy. He represented the tribes in federal court because everything you have to represent a tribe with has to be done in federal court.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I said, Bear, could you look into this? And he said, yeah, okay. He made a few phone calls, came back to me and says, it's legit. Put your affairs in order and go. I said, wait a minute, put my affairs in order? He says, you may not want to come back, or you may not be able to come back. He said, put your affairs in order. And I was very apprehensive about this, but I did. Got my spiritual butt handed to me on a platter out there on a mesa top. Came back. In those days, my magical name was Lady Cassandra. And everybody called me Cassandra except the IRS and my boss at Lockheed. That was it.
Wow.
I came back and I called somebody up to let them know I was home. I said, hi, this is Cheryl. And they knew something was wrong. Okay.
Yeah.
My doctor looked me over and said, I think you've had a micro stroke. Okay. I was a basket case when I came back. My shrink, I was still using a psychiatrist after in the years following my gender change in 89, 90. And I was working with her. I told her gave her a report what the doctor said, told her what happened out there. And she looked at me and says, I was a non-practicing Jew before I knew you. She says, I've begun practicing again because you're the most spiritual person I've ever known. And she says, you want my professional opinion? I said, yeah, go ahead, Roberta. And she looks at me and says, I think the sky opened up and God talked to you and it fried your ass.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of people that can definitely happen to. I was a pastor for about 11 years, and I had always walked in the more mystical side of Christianity and studied the ancient Hebrew mysticism, and I wanted to understand why. Okay, not just we believe this, but I wanted to understand why we believed what we believed, and why they, more importantly, why they believed what they believed and performed how they acted and the different things. So I took some deep dives into it, and I taught a lot of that stuff within the church, which, as you can imagine, will get you your own hate fan club. So,
well, there's even people in the witch community that wouldn't give me the time of day in the DC region, the cabal witches down there, because I always cut my own path. In fact, when a Wicca priestess retires, or priest or priestess retires, there's an expectation in lineage I was initiated in that basically said, when you get to that point where you're retiring as a pastoral priestess, when you're running covens and teaching students and things like that, holding people's hand while they die and blessing babies, all the pastoral stuff. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Pastoral Wiccan priestess. And there's this expectation that you'll write a book of your life in magic. Some people write the Betty Crocker book of spells, some people write a memoir of their time in magic. Some people write a book of how to manage circles, gaggles, circles, clans, and covens, that kind of thing. All the different configurations of congregations, so to speak. And others just write maybe a history of their coven or something on that order. I decided to tackle a book of magical mechanics because I, over 44 years in the craft, 20 years ago, I determined that I thought the way we taught craft was ass backwards. People were coming into the craft and get a little bit of training and they start teaching them spell casting, and there were people who didn't even do the other half of it called divining, working with something like that, meditation or anything like that. And you need meditation to connect to the younger self or the Holy Ghost, as some people,
The source.
the source.
To
But
tap into the source, you have to
tap
have
into the
that.
tiny spark that's in us,
Yeah.
that's connected to the source, And so I started teaching my students differently. I started teaching them in a process that was more meditative. I taught them how to make bread initially. Tell them, this is your first spell. If you can't do this, you'll never do the magic, And in fact, it got to be a kind of a secret handshake. You'd go to a festival or something like that, and someone would say, I studied with Lady Cassandra. And other people who had studied with me would change the subject and engage you in a conversation about bread making. And if you didn't know what you were talking about, they knew you didn't study with me.
Yeah.
It was the
That
secret
is
handshake,
awesome.
But the bottom line was, I wrote this book of magical mechanics. My daughter looked at the first draft of this thing about 10 years ago, adopted daughter. I've had no children in my own loins. And she looked at it, and she's a magical adept in her own right, got the basic training with me, got her advanced training with people like Bear, other people, because mom's stupid, you know how that works, with young adults. And she looked at it and she says, my God, you're handing out loaded shotguns to third graders. I said, I made it that easy? She says, yeah. I said, good. That's what I was trying to do. I'm taking all the gobbledygook, all the out of it, and I took it down and I taught it in a 144-page book. I wish I had my copy. I had a copy right here. I was going to show it to you.
Awesome.
But the 144 pages, really small book. Title of it is Magical Musings of a Rogue Witch. Because people will say, well, why were you a rogue? And I said, if I had joined, and I'd been invited into 7 very, very exclusive covens. So some of these things are very casual. Some of them are very formal. Some of them are like Ivy League colleges. Okay, very snobby. Okay.
Yeah.
And if I had been, they all thought I was too much. After they got really looking at me, got me in kind of like their outer circle, they determined I was too much of a wild duck for them. Okay. I cut my own path. I mean, this UFO stuff, if I was doing what everybody else is doing, I'd be out here, be a MUFON field investigator doing CSI investigations instead of doing what we do. So the bottom line was, I decided to cut and do this book of magical mechanics. This is the physics behind magic, touching the woo. Okay.
That is awesome. And
I sent a third draft copy, which was just going to the editor, to people like Silver Ravenwolf and a lot of the prominent published witches. And I thought, they're going to hate this thing. And they all came back. This is the way it should be taught. This is what the blurbs look like. This is the way it should be taught. This is the way it should be taught. She takes you back to square one and draws you a whole new path for training. And it just, the blurbs were just made me cry. It was wonderful. So we did a book signing a couple of weeks ago. We're in New Age stores here, and I went over there with a crate of 30 or 40 books, and they were gone by the end of the day. I was stunned. They have since signed me up for 6 months worth of seminar class. I don't take on covens anymore. I don't do that kind of work anymore. I've done all of it. I've been on the local council of churches, that council, that kind of thing. That's always fun. You can sit there with a whole bunch of Abrahamic pastors sitting there saying, do you people worship the devil? No, we don't. Do you have a God? Yeah, we got him by the bushel. So, that's pretty much the way it worked. But when I say that,
councils where you've got like all the local pastors come in and they sit, and you've got everybody from every walk. Literally, you got every religion sitting in one room, and somehow we managed to walk out alive. Right?
Yes.
We have evolved a little bit.
I think that it all comes down to, like you've heard me say it a million times, it's labels. We're all talking about pretty much the same thing.
Thank you. Linda says that too. It's all about stupid labels, and people get all wormy about the labels.
It's a human thing.
Yeah.
I mean,
So the bottom line with all the mysticism, after that thing in New Mexico, I went into retreat for 2 years. I went to my job every day. Now, I used to have, at that time, about 105 students at various levels. I would be home one night in a week to do my grocery shopping and to do my laundry. And I was with other people all week long, in the evenings after work. After I went into retreat, I was home every night except Monday night when I went out and got my groceries. Okay, and did my laundry when I got home. I could do it anytime because I was home every night of the week. In fact, a friend of mine came to my house and my walls were stripped, painted beige. If you came into it before, it looked like an anthropology museum. I had crossbows up there, spears, wands, you name it. Something was on the wall. And she looked at me and she says, "What the hell happened?" I told her about the thing in New Mexico. And I said, for 2 years now, I've been getting up 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, sitting in an empty bathtub, scribbling or drawing in this thing. And she said, "Let me look at it. I got a master's degree in comparative religion." I didn't know what it was. And she flipped through it. It's just Tibetan Buddhism. What else would you like to know? And I said, "Huh?" I said, "I've heard of Tibet Buddhism. I thought that was in like Vietnam and Cambodia." I said, No, it's in Tibet, and it's very orthodox." And I said, "Really?" So we went and drove around, got a Yellow Pages out. This is early 90s. Yellow Pages were still around.
Yes.
And we got out the Yellow Pages and went around, drove around all the Buddhist temples we could find. Spent a whole weekend doing it. And we got this place out in the suburbs in Maryland, outside of D.C. And we're driving up the driveway. I said, "Stop." And she stopped. I flipped and opened the book, and there's the place. 6 pillars. I had the bushes in the right place.
Oh my gosh.
And then we got to in the parking lot, and there was this shrine. I had that too. It's drawn just like the shrine. Later, we showed it to the monks and nuns in the place, and they went bananas. They said, "This happens once in a while. People have this vision. Not, it's rare, but it happens."
Yeah.
It's just, you need to talk to Kempo. Kempo translates to dean or headmaster. And it turns out this is the head of Tibetan Orthodox Buddhism North America. Well, I decided to hang out there. So I hung out there very quietly. I didn't make any bones that I was Wiccan or a senior priest. A couple of times some of my students came and says, "Mother Priestess, what are you doing here?" I said, "Shh, I'm undercover. Leave me alone. I know I'm scrubbing the floor. I know I'm sitting here cutting meat in the back room. No. I'm cooking a lot, But that's it. So I hung out with the Buddhists for about 6 months, and about a month before Kempo got there, I stopped going over there because I couldn't stand these pretentious Buddhists as far as I could throw them. And I figured, I get a call from the monk who ran the kitchen. He says, "Cassandra, you got to come over here and do your hors d'oeuvre magic. You do great hors d'oeuvres. We got the Kempo here. He's got an entourage. We got all kinds of people here to meet him. You got to come over here and help me do your little things, And I said, "Okay, fine, I'll come over." I figured, I'll never get to see this guy. There's 300 people in the temple listening to him. I'll never see him. I'll be in the back room of the kitchen, cutting stuff. And a gal buddy of mine from New Jersey, good Wicca lady from Jewish Wicca lady from New Jersey. And we're back there cutting. Well, he decides to come back into the cooking area, and he's walking down through this reception line. So we're out there. Aprons are a mess.
Covered. Yeah, you've been cooking all day.
All cooking. We are just messy. And he gets up to this little 5'0" guy. He comes up and shakes hands, and suddenly gets hold of my hand. And suddenly it becomes a European head shake, and he's up in my face and saying, "I know you." Big deal with Tibetan Buddhists, especially the Orthodox. And he stands. I said, "Holiness, I've not met you in this lifetime." He says, "Oh no, 3-4 times past 400 years." And he shake hands with Lynn, not Linda, my wife, Lynn, a different person. And he shakes hands with, "Oh, I know you too." And he looks at his entourage amongst these two hang out together lifetime after lifetime. "Nice to see you again." And he toddles off. And I always kind of believe, Wiccans, believe in reincarnation and everything, but I never had it handed to me in a technical sense.
Sure.
And the lead monk is an American guy. He comes up to me. He says, "Look, I've been with him 15 years. He plays it close to his chest. He's only done that once in 15 years to someone else." I said, "When was that?" He says, 20 minutes ago in the parking lot to a lady from Australia. I'd go talk to him. This is a big deal. All right. So they get me an appointment. It's supposed to be a 15-minute appointment. It went 90 minutes. I get in there. I took the little book in there, and the monks had coached me how to come in and bow to the guy and everything. I come in and bow. He busts out laughing. "Get up on the couch. Talk to me." And I looked at him and I said, he says, "What were you raised?" I said, "Raised Roman Catholic." "Oh, still Catholic?" No, I've been running Wiccan shamans for the last 20 years. "Oh, still doing the yogi stuff, huh?" "I've done this before." He says, "Are you good at it?" I said, "Yeah, very good at it." He said, "You think you learned it all in one lifetime?" That's the first 10 minutes. And then he says, "Can I see your book? How did you find this?" And I said, "This." And he starts flipping through it. And he says, "Oh, who did all this?" And I said, "I did. 3 o'clock in the morning, coming out of visions in my head." And he's looking at it, and he's got this one book, and he's reading around the sides. And I says, "I don't know what that gibberish is." He says, "It's Tibetan." "What? It's Tibetan?" He says, "Yeah, you wrote the Heart Sutra. You wrote this?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "It's the Heart Sutra in Tibetan." And he starts reading it to me.
Oh, wow.
I am fried. So you got to remember what I looked like in those days. You don't see it now, but back in the day, back at that time, 94, I was Miss Corporate High Maintenance. My nickname was Napoleon in Heels. Okay. and Miss High Maintenance, I'll send you my glamour shot. You'll get the idea. So I got down on my knees. I was in a charcoal power suit, and I sat down and got on my knees and said, "You're a monk, you're a senior monk, you're a lama, you can't lie to me. Have I been in this tradition before?" And he said, "Yes, many times." I said, "Have I been a monk, a nun, a yogi, all these things before in many lives?" He said, "Yes, many times." And I said, "I've been your student before." He said, "Yes, several times." I said, "Have you ever been my student?" He said, "No, you're too stupid." But when I asked later for permission, about a month later, they ordained me and Lynn. There's in the Orthodox tradition, other traditions of Buddhism have just the monks and nuns and then lay people, right? In the Orthodox tradition, 1,000 years ago, a guy by the name of Padmasambhava came from India, and the first people he taught Buddhist theory and technology to. It's not a religion, it's a technology. Taught them the technology were the shamans of Tibet. They saw the logic in it and embraced it. Now, in the early versions in the kingdoms of that time, the kings recognized that there was a sutra tradition, which you see the regular books, monks and nuns, buzz cuts, yellow and burgundy robes, that kind of thing. And then there's the white and burgundy robes, long hair, okay? And those were the shaman types, or what they call a nakpa for men, nakmo for woman. And both of us were ordained nakmos. And we said, "Why are you doing this?" He says, "Just a renewal of vows for you." All these other people had been going through training for months, I said, "You sure?" He says, "Yeah, you've done it before. You know it all." I do. So going along, and the bottom line was it had reciprocal privileges. If you get the haircut and the local lama says it's okay, you can wear monastic robes. So I said, "Okay, fine, I'll wear monastic robes." And I went to the lama, "Can I just get the haircut?" So I got the navy buzz cut again. Okay. And so I went to the head monk who hands them, not so much the head monk. I went to the head monk to get a set of robes. He didn't like me. "You don't know what gender you are. I'm not going to give you a set of robes. I think you're confused." I looked at him. I said, "I know exactly what gender I am. You just don't know what I am." Because I confuse everybody. I'm a little of everything. That's why I wear the they and them button. Them button. I am a fusion. I am the unity of everything. So the bottom line was, I went home. I've been in the theater for years. I went ahead and made a set. First time, wore them at the temple. They looked at me. "Oh, you made them wrong. They're supposed to be this way, this way, this way. Oh, no, you can't wear those. Oh, you made them wrong. Oh." And so as soon as Kempo came to town about a month later, they all tattled on me.
Oh,
okay.
Of course.
So he calls me in. He takes, and they're all sitting there all smug. "Oh, yeah, you're going to get yelled at by Kempo." And he looks at me. He says, "You made these?" I says, "Yeah." "How'd you know how to make old world cut?"
So they didn't know what they even were looking at, basically.
No.
they were looking at the modern standard.
Yeah.
They were looking at the way the Westerners wear the robes. I made mine
Traditional.
very traditional, very North
Yes.
Asia. So that was kind of where it went. So I spent 7 years in monastic life, went every day to work at Lockheed Martin, dressed like the Dalai Lama, headquarters. That ruffled, pushed the diversity policy to the bleeding edge.
Wow.
Okay. Miss Corporate Security. I was an investigator for everything from hackers to stolen laptops, running around with my clipboard and my Buddhist robes, but the bottom line on the whole thing was 7 years in that kind of life. They even sent me to upstate New York. I ran a center up there for 3 years, and nobody bothered to do a marketing study. They said, "Oh, we need a Buddhist monk here for Marion Barry people," So my lineage sent me up there. Okay. Turned out to be my hometown. I said, "Are you sure you want to send me there? I grew up there." "Oh, hometown kid. That's good." No, it's just, no, they won't take me seriously.
Right.
I was a geek in school. They won't take me seriously. But they sent me there anyway. So I ran the place for 4 years. I was a chaplain for 4 hospitals, corporate job in the daytime, up all night holding somebody's hand as they're drawing the last breath. You know how that works.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you still got to go to work at 6 o'clock in the morning, and it was grueling, but it was fun. The problem is that nobody did a marketing study, and they found out they sent me to a town that had a lot of Buddhists. But I'll give you the Christian comparison. They sent a Russian Orthodox priest with the big hat and the big beard to an Episcopalian town.
Yeah.
Okay. They sent a Orthodox Buddhist nun to a town that's got Zen and Theravada, which is basically Southern Asia. The people are all eating just vegetables. Tibetans eat meat, baby.
Yeah.
So that was the difference, and they were all happy to see me there, but nobody came to my center except the Wicca kids. Funny how that worked out,
Mm-hmm.
So Lama says, "Go ahead, teach them, work a little Buddha Dharma into the witch theory, and it'll be just fine, and don't try and convert them. Just teach the theory around the edges so that they get a bigger view of what their magic and what their connection to the force is." And I said, "Fine, we'll do that." And that's how I ran into that. And then I came to a point where, because I was up there by myself, Kempo referred to it as my mountaintop. Okay. I asked him, "Are you sure you want to send me up there?" He says, "It's going to be your mountaintop. Go do it." So I did. So I came back to him in 2004. I went up there in 2002, and I came back to him in 2004, and I sat down and I told him what I had come to understand. And he said, "What has this taught you?" I said, "I'm no longer qualified to be a Buddhist nun." He said, "No, you're not." I said, "But you told us the robes are permanent." And he said, "Yeah, we tell people that, but you can't evolve out of them. And you have. So I want you to go back to yogi robes, do that stuff. You can be married if you want. But here's the trick. The person that would come into a relationship with me has to be equally qualified to me. As like in scholarship, so to speak." Turns out, Linda, who we met in live action role play gaming, my Lama approved, by the way. He looked at my closet one day. He was visiting. He looked at my closet and he says, "What's the Soviet uniform? What's these 1930s dresses? What's this, stuff, And, what's this suit of armor here, And he says, "What is this?" And I said, "Well, it's live action role playing." I started showing him pictures from all these events. He says, "Oh, little weekend mini reincarnations. I like it. Do it." So
That's fun.
It was fun. And so Linda and I had met in live action role play gaming, and I had made an announcement. Remember the live journal that was on before Facebook?
Oh yeah.
I made an announcement that I was being released from my robes, and Linda and I had become friends in live action role play. So I got a note from her 20 minutes later. "I want firsties." And so we did this year-long courtship kind of thing, I wasn't coming out of celibacy. It wasn't this big jump to come out of celibacy.
Yeah.
Okay. I wanted a bass ale more. Okay. I was wearing a lot of drink either,
Right. Yeah. You're completely different lifestyle. You're abstaining from all of the pleasures except for meat, of course.
Well, there was the other thing too about when you get rid of the haircut, the hard part for the nuns was losing all the pride stuff like makeup and hair and all this stuff.
The appearance stuff.
And people ask me all the time, he says, "Well, you're not in a monk anymore. Why aren't you more poofed up, And I said, you can take the girl out of the monastery, but you can't take the monastery out of the girl. Okay. I embrace these disciplines. I got enough vows to choke a horse as a yogi anyway, so I'm not going to monkey with it. So this is why I'm more plain Jane now, okay, and have been for the last 10 years. Actually, the last 15 years. So the bottom line on all of this stuff, I spent all this time in the mysticism, and the lamas understand our buddies. Okay,
Yep.
I had several senior lamas sit down and have long talks with me about it.
Oh, wow.
Okay. Our head lama of the Tibetan Orthodox tradition came one day from India, Venerable Rinpoche. He came, and after the temple emptied out and all the people left, the monks and nuns set up backyard barbecue, 55-gallon drums on the side, and backyard barbecue. He liked hot dogs, hamburgers. He's out there playing basketball with the young monks, that kind of thing. And so just almost 50 of us out there. So we're sitting there having non-alcoholic beer and eating hamburgers and hot dogs with holiness. And a couple of the nuns were asking him questions. And one of them asked, says, we talk about beings being throughout the universe. Aren't there beings like on the moon? And he considers the question for a minute and starts looking across all the monks and nuns, and he points at me and Vicky. Remember the lady? We know you and everything. Mm-hmm. Points at me and Vicky, another wicked witch, by the way, and points at, these two. They've been touched by the sky dancers, takinis. Okay, and we're going, oh shit! They just announced that you just outed us, and I didn't share anybody with that. In fact, when I met Linda, I sat her down before it got really serious. I sat her down one Saturday morning and said, I got to tell you something. There's some folks that from out of town that touch me rather regularly, and that's what the deal is. So there will be days I won't know when I wake up. I won't know where I am. I won't know when I am. Okay. Mm-hmm. And so that's where it went. So he had to meet her. So when Linda and I got serious, I took her to meet him. She's a Zen Buddhist. She had like 300 books in her library on Zen Buddhism. She was better read than I was. And he came back to me and says, you got a scholar there. No problem. Good. Yeah, you're good. You're equally qualified. Go, go argue with each other, and we have some good Buddhist arguments in this house.
I'd imagine.
We have some good Buddhist arguments in here. Two different,
especially being from two different practice.
Yeah, two different lineages, because Zen, if she wants to meditate, she stares at a blank wall. I've got this beautiful altar over here, very ornate with all kinds of stuff. Yeah. And she tolerates the fact that I still have my hand in magic. And that was another thing I had to kind of educate her on. It says, look, now that you're in my household, it's a magical household. Be careful what you think. Be careful what you say. The rules are different here. Okay. And she quickly found out just how different they are. So, but the bottom line is mysticism is spoken here. So in terms of UFOs, there's a lot of evidence to indicate some of it is not tin cans. It is a mystical manifestation. After all of reality is a construct anyway. It's trumped up holodeck, and that's the way I teach it. And that they're touching us in a variety of ways. And the Lama put it to me one day. He says, a lot of people don't see all the paranormal going on around them. Okay. On a day, because they got such a narrow view of reality. And they need to make their view of reality a little bit more elastic.
Yes.
Okay? And during one of our conversations, we came to the idea that just seeing a thing like a UFO manifestation or being touched by ET, either in your dream space, which they do frequently, or by taking you aboard something, And he says, that expands your reality and your touch and grasp of reality, that it's a bigger place. And they interviewed 4,400 abductees.
That's right.
For the Dr. Mitchell Foundation. Okay. Ray Hernandez and those guys. And the one thing Ray and I talked about a couple of years ago was the fact that, he says, I've got Bible thumpers, they come back spiritual. I've got agnostics, they come back spiritual. He says, ET's trying to turn us all into mystics, and I couldn't disagree with him.
Yes.
And you get this grab bag of experiencers where you do have some of the experiencers who do come back with a more spiritual view of their reality, and then you've got the complete opposite end of the spectrum as well, which, I mean, you're going to have that almost with anything, but it's I wonder if that has to do with, and this is hypotheticals, I wonder if that might have something to do with the types, or the possible types rather, of beings that are taking people or in some way touching or encountering these people.
It probably is. I think it is too.
Yeah, because that's the only thing that, like, logically, looking at it from a logical perspective and looking at it from even from a religious aspect, you see these different outcomes that come from certain denominations or certain sects. You see these different reactions, different visceral reactions, different visceral reactions when you mention, say, Pentecostal, or when you are, say, in a huge for comparison with Buddhists, if you have the Zen and the Orthodox Tibetan, and there's some of those folks that may not get along. They understand the fundamentals of their theology, but they might squabble and bicker back and forth, and to the point where they'll have disagreements that aren't as amicable as your situation with you and your wife.
Well, let me give you a quick example. The last couple of years, I was actually living in a monastic household. Okay, again, the American Tibetans in Maryland, they were American Tibetans. Okay, or American Tibetan Buddhists. They were all Baptist. Previously, 20 years ago, they were Baptist or Jewish or Catholic or whatever. Okay, so they had carried some of that baggage with them. The monks wouldn't let me live with them, and the nuns wouldn't let me live with them. Okay,
right.
And some Burmese monks took mercy on me. They liked me because I was good. I was good with the laying on of healing. Okay.
Yeah.
And they invited me to come live. They had a collection of townhouses that they were in one complex of different units of townhouses. They took over gradually over a period of years, and there was like 3 of us in the townhouse that I lived in with them, and they loved having me there because I was Vajrayana Buddhist, which is very orthodox, and then they're Theravada. So their Theravada view was get enlightened, get out of Dodge, don't look back. Okay, get to nirvana and don't look back. The Manayana Vajrayana Buddhists say take the Bodhisattva vow, get enlightened, get out, come back into the burning house and get your friends out.
Right.
Okay, which is the mindset. So, needless to say, dinner time was always a monastic debate, or the polite word for a polite argument.
Right. Yeah.
But they were the most respectful because they saw the sacredness of my androgynous presentation, and they would introduce me as, this is our brother Tashi. She is one of our brothers.
That's cool.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was a full embracing of yourself.
Yes.
It wasn't trying to
true self.
They recognized the unity being here. Mm-hmm. And in fact, Ven Uzan, who was a senior monastic, the equivalent of a lama, I went to my parents' home in upstate New York. We were going to go up. Somebody gave Our Holiness a 350-acre dairy farm. And it needed to be not surveyed, but somebody go up and take pictures of the place.
Yeah, somebody just need to go take a look, make sure you weren't inheriting some kind of.
Well, no, there was all the there was a machine, there was a huge machine barn, there was the dairy barn, there was the hay barn, there was a house that was built 350 acres. There was a house that was built in 1920s with a 1970 extension. There were 10 rusted cars hidden behind high thicket on blocks, all that kind of thing. And I went up there, and photographically map the thing with a bag full of box cameras. Okay. And Uzin went with me. And we stayed at my parents' house one night on the day going up and the day coming back, 2 nights. And my mother looked over the table, and she's Hellfire and Brimstone Pentecostal. And she looks over at him and says, "Why do I have 2 monks in my house? 2 Buddhist monks in my house?" And he looks at her very politely. He says, "Madam," he says, "you have no idea the great blessing that's been brought on this house by having 2 monks in your house. And 2, you have no idea the awesome blessing you have in your house from the being that you raised."
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm disowned and disinherited at this point. Funny how that worked out. But I wasn't meant to stay in their family.
Mm-hmm.
I've come to understand it. I know what I'm here to do. And
Sure.
so I'm here to enlighten people that there's a bigger universe out there. So that's what my practice is these days. Is I'm not converting anybody to Buddhism. I'm converting them to being deeply spiritual and connected to the one.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that is absolute what you just said. It's all about labels. It doesn't matter. It is. I like the message. I love the message.
I am the one. You are the one. We are all
Yes.
part of the one. Deal with it.
Yeah, right. I mean, that's the problem with humanity. They want to throw labels onto everything and fight about it. So, I mean, and your work in ufology just goes on to actually validate a lot of this as well. Simply,
We're trying.
Yes.
Okay, we're trying at least the formal work we're doing with it, with the numbers and things like this. This is again the passion of the work. Didn't monks used to illuminate the Bibles and things? Well, that I think of me as that monk who's doing all the statistical work.
Yep.
And that's a good way to look at it because I'm putting an awful lot of effort in because this knowledge, this wisdom needs to be out there, and it needs to be out there beyond my lifetime. And monks and nuns in the Tibetan tradition are taught. I want to give it to you as a theory. It's not a theory, it's practice actually, but a thing called deep future thinking. This isn't about us planning the next holiday bash we're going to do for the thing. This is
like
about
prophetic vision.
We're building something that will pass by us. It's like the great cathedrals in Europe took 7 or 8 generations to build these things. We are trying to instill that kind of thinking in the people who participate in the congregations. Think beyond what you're doing now. Think about beyond your kids, beyond your grandkids, beyond your grandkids' kids.
Yeah.
Think deep. And we are about anchoring something. And I use that thinking in this. We don't know when disclosure is going to come. It's actually been here in a lot of different forms already.
Yes.
But the point is that we need to gradually wake people up. E.T. says, "What are those dunderheads doing now?"
Yes.
They have infinite compassion towards us. And I got to say something about, you were talking about different ones touching us and things. I see this. You see on the web, especially in Facebook, if you look for reptilians, you always see this picture of some muscular guy who looks like a T-Rex in a suit. The Spider-Man, looks like he needs a case of prune juice.
It's the lizard from Spider-Man.
Okay. Right. And that's what they always paint him as. And the people I've interviewed as a journalist, they're soft-spoken. They're gentle. They're enlightened. So what's the gender? Why the Spider-Man monster lizard man?
I blame David Icke personally.
Huh?
I blame David Icke personally.
Yeah, all right.
That's that because we've kind of covered that before on Wild and Weird Radio, and we're going to do an in-depth, and what you had just mentioned will be used in the future for the in-depth discussion on the reptilians and reptoids episode that we do, because David Icke is responsible solely for this massive, I think, misunderstanding of what some people view as gospel fact. And that's where you have these weird, very Stan Lee, Jack Kirby style lizard man, and it's not like you had mentioned. A lot of the stuff prior to when we actually started doing research for this, a lot of the stuff that I had heard was what you had just mentioned, that it wasn't this like nefarious massive super
Evil.
being hulking creature, as
Yeah.
much as it was something that had at multiple times during our existence been of some assistance to mankind.
There is clay, surviving clay
Yeah,
art from
exactly.
Samaria.
Yep.
Okay, from Samaria that looks like them. Okay,
And those were the Dogu, I believe.
yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Not the
and
Dogon, but the
not
Dogu.
Dogon, the Dogu.
Yeah.
In fact,
Aren't you proud, Ron? I'm learning.
I am so proud of you right now. I don't
there
even
was
know.
there
I'm
was a
like,
movie. There was a movie. They made it about that stuff up in Alaska,
Yeah.
and the voice that came down to them from whoever it was. I was sitting there watching the movie, and I heard this. I looked at Linda. And I said, "My God, that's Sumerian," and and I've got a little bit of archaeology background, so
Yeah.
but I'm sitting there looking at wow, but this fits into this model. And you hear the thing about them being shapeshifters. Okay, they got the ability to put on a glamour, so to speak. So you're in the supermarket line, just one with you. Okay, the friend,
And that's a
say.
technology, not
Yeah, it's not
it's
an
not yeah.
Okay, so they put on the glamour. They look like a human because they're approximately the same height we are. But the thing is, the kids or people on certain psychotropic drugs, kids under about 7 years old, can see through it. And so you say, the lady, you're in the supermarket line, hey, mommy, look at the dinosaur, and the person, this apparently human person looks back and says, oh, what a nice hatchling. I mean, nice child you have there,
Yeah.
so.
And what's really funny, I don't know if this is going back and forth here. This is just fun conversation at the moment. The TV show Resident Alien. Have you seen it?
I've heard a little bit about it. I'm not watching much TV really.
It's so funny. It's one of the few TV shows that I actually dial into to see. And it's because they do take the phenomena seriously, but comedically. So there are aspects like what you just mentioned about kids under a certain age and kids who are on psychotropic drugs can see through this glamour appearance of what it's masking, and they see the real being. And that's part of the comic arc behind it, is because there's this one kid in the neighborhood who can see the alien and knows he's an alien, and they're constantly fighting back and forth. He can't kill the kid, even though he wants to kill the kid, because he's just so mad that like the kid foils everything he does.
Yeah.
And it's hilarious. It's good
something
comedy.
Something Van Oozen and I ran into. We'd be in the supermarket. Remember, we're there in our formal robes, right? And we're in a supermarket, and a kid over sitting in the basket nudges his mom. Mom, look, Jedi Knights.
Did you play it up? You so should have played it up.
That's funny.
No.
No,
I wasn't in a
yeah, I was not in a position to do anything like that. I was just so startled to hear that. I think the biggest thing to get to people is the fact that there's this very big spiritual component to this whole field of UFOlogy. Beyond. Okay, let's do it on the first level. It's no longer about lights in the sky. It's like Steve Bassett says, it's about lies on the ground. Okay, but what we're being told, it is about, we have been shepherded as a culture by many species over millennia. Okay, and they're scared to hoo-ha that we're going to nuke this planet morbid with our backs of atomic matches. Okay, and that's their biggest concern. And they see we're coming along. We're coming along gradually, but it's there's a certain percentage of the population that is not going to believe it, even when we show it to them. I don't believe the shot's any good. They're not going to believe those are really aliens. It's a conspiracy.
Yes.
We're going to have that. And it's not going
Yes.
to be from the people you expect. Honest to God, it's not going to be from the people you expect. So,
Yeah.
but bottom line, researching UFOs has been a splendid fun. Writing it for 7 years. If somebody wants to read my columns, we made. I was always a freelance, so I always owned the columns. So I was able to, when the paper was going out of business, the publisher let me come in and purge all my
Oh,
columns
that's
off the
awesome.
server.
Oh,
Okay,
wow.
and these were the edited versions. Okay,
Yeah.
so there was only in 7 years 237 columns. There was a 238th. I was never censored, but I was spiked once. One article was spiked. In 2016, I'd been writing for 3 years. I wrote an article about what disclosure might look like. Okay, and it was very snarky. And I said, President, Joint Chiefs of Staff, couple leadership in Congress will be standing behind him. They might introduce us to Mr. Zazumba from the Pleiades or something like this. And since these are we've touched the spacefaring race and they want to be our friends. Da, 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 da. Okay. Well, suddenly these folks are going to be the darlings of morning TV, Good Morning America, that kind of thing. Okay. We're going to see reconciliation shows. We're going to see Travis Walton and Whitley Strieber on there with the people who abducted them, no hard feelings, that kind of thing, and this is, and the fashion industry is going to be affected. The publishing industry is going to be affected. The perfume and cosmetics industry, get a perfume that's from the Pleiades or one from Zeta Reticuli, whatever. And then the last part of the article basically said, and even the late night watchers of TV will not be able to get away from it. If you were abducted or lost a job because you reported a UFO, or you were a pilot who lost their job because you reported a UFO, or you had cattle mutilations or any form of livestock mutilations due to new galactic treaties, compensation may be available. Contact our lawyers. Da, 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 da. And that was the script. It was at the end of the article. And
Love
the editor spiked it. And I called him
Oh,
up. And hey, I'd done open letters to the New York State delegation in Congress. Would you guys stand up and speak up for disclosure? I printed out when I was starting to work on the book. I printed out all the congressional districts using New Fork data, and I printed all the sightings by congressional district. Boy, the phone calls we got at the editorial desk was crazy. They liked it so much that when I added the MUFON data, the art department got involved. We did it by a map of the state pointing to all the congressional districts. More call. Oh my God, they just wanted to put us in a hole, cover it up. So they said I called the editor up and said, "Why'd you spike it? Is there something wrong? Are you censoring me? Is there something we can do to it?" He says, "No, you've been writing here for 3 years. You've got fantastic gravitas out there with your audience. It was too silly for you. You're an expert now, and you can't do
you
silly
can't
shit
have a
like
do
that."
that.
or
That
yeah.
was it. So when we printed the UFO Beat is the name of the book. It's available on Amazon. Somebody goes to Amazon for books and say UFO Costa or Cheryl Costa. You'll see the two desk references: the white book, the pink book, and the UFO Beat. The UFO Beat has all my stories that I taught.
Okay.
Now people ask all the time, how come the new book 2001 to 2020 is pink, bright fuchsia? You can flag in an aircraft with this thing. Okay. Back in 2019, before we knew anything about COVID, in 2019, some of the usual suspects in DC, our lobbyists, called me up and said, "Hey, Rubio's got this bill that he's going to try to attach to a military spending bill or something he knows will pass." Of course, we had no idea he was going to be doing it to the COVID bill. Okay.
Yeah.
He says that might lead to congressional hearings in 2020, maybe 2021. Remember, this is 2019. And I said, okay. He says, you ladies are the only people who've ever produced any statistics. Even Blue Book didn't do this. Okay. He said, would you be willing to testify before Congress? Remember, we were both former government contractors. You work your whole career in such a way as not to have to testify before Congress.
Right.
Okay. So we had to talk it out, and we said we talked it out for a couple of days, and we said, okay, we called them up and said, yeah, if they get this thing through and they do congressional hearings by some stroke of blessing from heaven, we'll say, okay, fine, we'll be happy to testify. Fine. By the way, those 5-pound packages are short, terse letter in there with an executive summary. The bottom part says, we are the civilian experts on UFO statistics in the United States. Please contact us when you hold congressional hearings. So I didn't want to see congressional hearings with a march of swaggering Navy pilots and things. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So Linda and I talked about this, and we said, okay, so picture this. We're at a congressional hearing. We've sworn, we're talking. They're asking us questions. They're up there behind that desk, thumbing through things. We want them to know this book was done. UFOlogy is a good old boys club. You know that. Okay?
Oh, yeah.
So
Yeah,
we said,
yeah.
we want the people to know that this book was done by women. And said, let's make this thing bright, bloody fuchsia. You can flag in an aircraft, and everybody will know it's our book. 2, we dedicated to Coral Lorenz, who was the lady who founded APRO back in the day, back in the 50s, early 50s, that literally led to MUFON.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And we dedicated it to her. Made by women, dedicated to a woman. And that's what the whole idea behind the Pink Book. And it's been picking up traction with the podcast. You know, hey, the Air Force had Blue Book, you have Pink Book. Hey,
I love it. That's awesome.
Well, another thing you inadvertently did was, because you were talking about you could flag in an aircraft, is you also made it to the point where when it is on someone's bookshelf, say they have a library case that has 300 to 700 books on it. I don't have any books that are in the paranormal, UFO, or Bigfoot universe that are many other colors than black. So when I have one on there that has a fuchsia spine, I'm going to instantly be like, right here, look at it.
Yep.
You know
what we're going to do with the book and shape series with the books, we're going to take the 4 census regions.
Yeah.
And all the states that are in one census region is going to be one color. Okay. Whenever they come out, they might come out individually with other books, you know, but they will be one color. Like the West Coast will be like yellow because it's like desert. We're going to do like the northeastern states blue or something like that.
Oh, that's cool.
So each of the 4 major congressional census regions will be a different. Those books will be a uniform color. Now, we had toyed with the idea of making the series rainbow colored, but we decided not to push that issue.
Yeah.
We're gay,
cool,
you know.
It
Gay
well,
household.
you're going to see it. The good thing though, like there are a handful of books I have. One of them being is a beautifully written book, and if you ever have time to pick it up, it's called "The Dark Divide: Where Bigfoot Walks," and just beautifully written book by Michael Powell, and it has a bright yellow spine, and I never have to question where it's at. Like to go grab it, it's wonderfully marked just because it's color. And so having those multicolored, rainbow colored, whatever books will make it, especially for people who are interested in the research, who are interested in the data collection, if they're needing to reference something like, oh, well, I know this one's in the blue one, or I know this one's going to be in this one.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So they can just, instead of having to pick all 4 or 5 up, look at them and be like,
Yeah.
all right, which one do I need? I know instinctually, just based off the color assignment, which one
Well,
it is.
these are all going to be thick enough. Okay. They'll all be up in the, this is 374 words. The Pink Book is over 400. So they're all going to be, except for when you get down to the bottom states, they're on North Dakota, South Dakota, those kinds of states are only going to be maybe 50 pages a book, you know.
Sure.
But we may even combine North Dakota and South Dakota, you know, because we have to have a 24-page book minimum.
Sure.
Now, Linda, people ask us this was the original white book. Okay. Now, why did you make it white? Linda said, we're not going to do any cute little aliens on there. The UFO was hand sketched by an artist friend of ours because we wanted it to look like it was something somebody had given a researcher sketched on a napkin, sketched on a pizza box, something like that. We wanted that to be there. Okay. Now, Linda, having worked for the National Academy of Science before her EPA job, knew how to make it look like a government report. We thought, why not be a little subversive, make it look like an official government report so it looked comfortable on some congressman or senator's desk.
Yeah.
That's great. I love
it's
it.
awesome.
That is great.
That's like one of the best marketing ploys I think I've seen.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
So that was kind of where we came from with the whole thing. So we've had fun with it. There's been frustrations with it because you wouldn't believe some of the hate mail we get. You didn't put any stories. You didn't put any. It's all charts, graphs, and numbers. Oh, it's boring, and it was very frustrating because people would hurt our stars on Facebook, on Amazon, by doing that and doing it, and Amazon finally caught on that all the people who knew what they were looking at were giving it 5 stars, and the Pink Book was interesting. It had 5 stars, but there was one with a 4-star, and the guy complained that Linda wrote a very scathing preface. And her preface was, here we are 5 years later with our second desk reference book, and we're still we're still doing the government's job. And this project has been paid for by an underpaid college librarian and a retired aerospace worker. Okay, and that was her tone. She was very very caustic about the issue, that this should be being done by the Census Department or the Education Department.
Yeah,
team up with Census and maybe Education Department or something like that, getting that information out. And there should be multiple 800 numbers for people to report this up. It's one of the other major reasons people don't report UFOs. A lot of people still don't know where to report them, so they call the police department. It goes on the blotter, but it goes no further. I have people say to me, well, did you check with the newspapers? Well, I worked in a newspaper, and the editors told me, yeah, we get 5 or 6 of those a week. They go in the garbage can. That was the mindset. So the only places, and there's a lot of little mom and pop databases out there. There's a lot of people online think, well, I'm going to start one of them. We're going to do it right, and they hoard these things, and they won't share them with you. And
yeah, we're discovering that because we created an open source data pool where everybody can come and submit their data, archive their data, share their data.
We've had people I've had international emails, all this stuff saying, hey, we'd like to get it and put it up online for free. I said, we have 6,000 hours in working on this thing. I've had PhDs email me and say, would you give it to us, you dumb little ladies?
No.
And we quite literally have had this. And we say, wait a minute. I had one guy say, well, your book is like $40 I said, okay. He says, we just should be out there for free. I said, okay. Are you willing to come over and mow my lawn all summer for free? Are you willing to come over and paint my porch for free?
Because this was a service.
Yeah. And they said, well, no. And I said, well, don't ask me to give my intellectual property away.
Yeah.
And this has been a big deal. People have been telling us, oh, you got to put it up for free. I said, no, I don't.
No.
And then they want me to put it in Kindle so they can steal it,
Right.
So,
because then it's like for 99 cents, you can read this on your Kindle.
I had a book. I had published a book. I'm a published playwright. And I had my publisher going to me, can we do an ebook of it? I said, it had already been out in print. I said, yeah, go ahead. Within 2 weeks, it was available free all over the internet. Okay.
Oh, wow.
So, and people started asking us about making Kindle. Well, first thing, this is an 8.5 by 11 book. Okay. I generated a Kindle version of it for my own use to see if it would work. We put it on my Kindle, Kindle Fire. Okay. I was on a radio show. This was the first book. I was on a radio show or a podcast, something like that. And we were on a commercial break, and I was trying to thumb through some stuff very quickly. And it was all this trying to make it grow, get to the right one, all this. It was just easier to lay this big book across my lap and flip a few pages, So I said, no, this is not practical. Because it's all charts, graphs, and tables. That does not convert to a Kindle format worth a damn. So we just said, no, we won't be making it available in Kindle, and you'll have to just reconcile killing a tree for our book.
No, I like the actual books myself. So, it's kind of like I don't know. So many people don't even know what a book is anymore. It's just crazy.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, people say to me all the time, "Oh, it should be electronic," and I said, "Wait a minute. I've got a BlackBerry sitting in a box in my storage unit and a couple of old phones sitting there that I wrote things on those devices, and I don't even know if I can turn them on anymore, even if I charge them up."
Yep.
Because the electronics in some of those machines, they didn't know about the idea that the tin that was soldering the chips in measles and grows, and the chips don't work anymore. Okay,
Yes.
hell, I got thumb drives. I got thumb drives sitting here that I can't get the data off them because they were cheap chips.
Same thing.
Yeah.
Right there.
Yep. There you go.
I don't even remember what's on it. But yeah, I mean, and
they're still finding Bach and Beethoven symphonies in people's attics in Germany. So paper.
Yes, paper, photographs. These are things that will actually last. I mean,
well, let's take this a step further.
Yeah.
State University. I'm gonna wait till Joe gets back on. You on, Joe? Got your headset on?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay. In November, before we remember, we moved in December.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, to Cleveland, Ohio. We're in a place called Rocky River, and it's a western suburb of Cleveland. And actually, I'm enjoying it here. I really am a lot. But the State University of New York at Albany, okay, they have taken my papers. They came down with a moving truck, and they took 25 crates of stuff out of my storage unit. Okay, I was the word transgender? I was one of the 6 people who coined it.
Whoa.
Back in the 80s, I was on the board of a group called the International Foundation for Gender Education. And there was about 6 of us that got outed. I got outed in a national tabloid. Okay. My grandmother bought that one at the drugstore, or the supermarket, and saw me there in a dress and said, "Oh my God, boy, he looks good in a dress," So she was one of the few relatives that was kind to me about that. But the deal was there were about 6 of us that could go on national television. So back in the day, I had a high security clearance, and the government was going to take my clearance away from me. And I'd already been outed, and they said, "Well, we think you can be blackmailed." Like I said, "I'm going to take your clearance. I'm going to turn your clearance off." I said, "Can you give me a couple of weeks? I could fix that." And he said, "I doubt it, but okay, I'll be back in 3 weeks. I'll turn it off then." And when he came back, he called me over to the office and personnel, and I came in. I threw a VHS tape on the desk, and I said, "I'm the blonde on Phil Donahue. I'm the redhead on Gary Collins." And he looked at me. He says, "You came out on national television?" His jaw went down to here, And I said, "Yeah." So I says, "I made VHS tape copies. You said you felt that because the guys in my office and the project here don't know about it. I handed out 16 VHS tapes, and they took them home and watched them with their wives." 2 weeks later, I get a letter from the Defense Investigative Agency, and they said, "We thought that was bad judgment. We're going to send you to see a Department of Defense certified psychiatrist."
Yeah.
Fine.
Sounds typical.
Send me to somebody who's got sex and gender experience. So they sent me down to see this guy. He talks to me for 20 minutes. I wasn't fully through transition yet at that point. Okay. I got pretty soft. I was pretty fluffy around the edges. Eyebrows were getting thinner, a lot of earrings, that type of thing. And still wearing the IBM white shirt and tie to work, so to speak. Okay. But I'd been in therapy for a couple of years. I was already on hormones, that type of thing. And this guy talked to me for 20 minutes. I showed him some articles I wrote for the National Gender Education magazine. He says, "You're her. Oh my God, pleasure to meet you. I've read all these articles, So he says, "Cheryl, you're saner than the people who sent you here. But I got to run you through a full set of psychologicals." Well, I just had a set done at Hopkins last year. He said, I got to run you through a set. It's on there, Nickel. Don't worry about it. I said, fine. So he ran me through a full set of psychologicals, and it comes back. The answer comes back, and they run it through all these specialists, subject X, what's this? And somebody who should be in Mensa, highly visually oriented, you're going to love this, has very poor arithmetic skills. There's a quick story there too, but it said basically, and they said very healthy woman, maybe slightly hysterical, took this test, and that's what the Hopkins people had said. The Hopkins people told me to get a nice scientific calculator, a tube of super glue, and glue it to my hand because my arithmetic skills were terrible. But they also explained to me that I do my processing out here someplace, much like Einstein did. I flunked math all through high school because I couldn't ever show my work.
That was me. Algebra 1, Algebra 2, I got kicked out, or I didn't get kicked out, but I flunked them because I couldn't show my work. And then I had a Scottish professor that taught a summer class at my high school, just showed up, and he would write out all the problems. And like, I'd just say, do I have to do all of this work out, or can I just give you the answers? He said, can you work them out? I was like, yeah, but I don't work them out traditionally the way that, you guys do on the board. I have
the way
my
you're
own...
expecting. Yeah.
And so he's like, let me see your work. Just do a couple of them. Let me see your work, like the way you do it and how you come to your conclusion. And then we'll go from there. But in a very thick Scottish accent.
Yes.
And so I do it and I show him. He's like, huh. Yeah, that works.
Yeah.
Yeah, this will do. And then let me go on about my way. And it was great.
The guidance counselors in high school yelled at me all the time, you're goofing off. Got in the Air Force in 1970. I graduated in the lower quarter of my class. And got in the Air Force and said, anybody test you because you're dyslexic?
Wow.
They taught me how to compensate for it. Okay. Now, when the white book came out, the first book of statistics, and the New York Times did the article about it, I got calls from people I hadn't heard from my senior class in 40 years. Called me up and said, you flunked math through all through high school and you published a book of statistics? Cheryl, we've got 6 dead math teachers rolling over in their grave like a rotisserie.
That's great. Oh, that's fun.
The thing was, I let the Excel and the database do the arithmetic. I do the high level thinking. Let the computer do all the heavy lifting for me. And although in my late 20s, when I was in the Navy, amazingly enough, something snapped one day. I was balancing my checkbook, and I keyed something funny in the calculator, and keyed something funny again. And next thing you know, I'm sitting there. My wife found me for hours sitting there playing with patterns of numbers. Suddenly, numbers were singing to me. And it was really weird. I went out to a used bookstore, bought Algebra 1, Algebra 2, that kind of thing, trig. And I literally went out on deployment, went out to deployment. And I literally retaught myself math. And we had enough guys that were the nuclear reactor guys in the back that were already big into math and physics and like that. If I needed help, one of the officers was happy to explain it to me. But it was like suddenly I hit some level of maturation. Now, these days, there's some consideration here to say, did I take a download one day?
Right?
Yeah.
There's a number of people wonder if that, a number of people have asked that question because I wrote 25 plays and I didn't write those plays.
Right.
Okay, and I couldn't write one right now to save my life. But the plays I wrote in the 80s and 90s, the book was called The 20th Century Collection. People think they're brilliant. In fact, that's one of the other things the New York State college university took. They took my entire collection of plays. They took all the stuff based on my activism. They said New York State loves social activists. You're right up there with Susan B. Anthony and all this kind of stuff. So the whole thing with us doing the transgender word, we were going on these television programs and we had to keep using these damn clinical words, cross-dresser, transsexual. There were clinical terms in DSM. DSM-3, that type of thing.
Yeah.
And drag queen, that type of thing.
Mhm.
And there was a medical doctor on the board of this thing. There were like 11 of us. And she thought about it. She says, why don't we come up with like an umbrella term? How about transgender? And we thought it would cover everybody. So the 6 of us that were doing all these syndicated television programs and radio interviews, editorial interviews with major papers and things like that, magazines and things, we basically said, okay, so we'll use that. And we worked very hard over 10 years to get it into the lexicon. So
Wow.
Here we are many years later. I wasn't thinking much about this. And then the other day, the paper here in Cleveland published a thing about Women's Suffrage Month. Okay. And going down through and she wrote this nice article, and then the columnist put a timeline in it. And at 1985, she says, and then Cheryl Costa, who now lives in Rocky River, Ohio, just up the road, was one of the 6 people who coined the term transgender.
Wow.
So
Look at that.
little piece of history there. So, and
Well, it's a big piece of history.
And we're producing the only statistics.
Yes. I'm so glad you got to come on after all this time. This has been so much fun.
We've been wanting to
you.
schedule this episode for a long time. Hold on here. Let's go ahead. We're going to wind this out, and we'll finish the chit chat later. So that way we're not holding this up.
Getting you in trouble.
Getting you in trouble. Guys, I hope you have all enjoyed this episode of Wild and Weird Radio. Remember to always like, share, and subscribe to us, to Hellbent Holler, and go ahead and mash them subscribe buttons, mash that notification button. So that way, every time new content drops, you are alerted immediately, and you can stop what you're doing, whatever that is, except for driving. I mean, maybe not stop driving immediately, but, stop what you're doing. Go immediately to check out what is fresh and new coming from Wild and Weird, West Virginia, and Hellbent Holler directly from YouTube, or you can catch us anywhere that podcasts are found, because we're now literally anywhere. If you have like one of those AI systems in your house, you can just tell them, hey, robot house thing, play Wild and Weird Radio. And guess what's going to happen? So guys, remember, like, share, and subscribe, or else might be visited by the extraterrestrials, and they might touch you. Think about that. Stay wild and weird, guys.